The power of mindfulness is the topic of this evening's talk, not a lecture. And the first thing to say about the power of mindfulness that often surprises people is that the power of mindfulness is limited. And it is also dependent on many other factors. In other words, the efficacy of practicing mindfulness depends on many conditions, on many factors. And although today, unlike maybe 30 years ago, we find that mindfulness is thought of as something very beneficial by everyone almost, to the extent that it's being taught by medical professionals in medical environments to help people deal with a variety of problems or afflictions, be it anxiety, depression, paranoia of one form or another, or just plain old common stress, which seems to be very prevalent in our society. And mindfulness is very helpful in dealing with many of these conditions and relieving some of them, provided that it is practiced in the right way and practiced with the right understanding and practiced with the supporting factors that enable mindfulness to have some beneficial results. When mindfulness practice is thought of as a panacea for everything and just put out there as whatever your problem, just practice mindfulness and it'll be solved. I think not only is it an exaggeration, I think it is a misrepresentation, and often the consequences of it are more than just disappointment. It can actually be harmful. Recently, I have read some articles of people who have reported some harmful results from practicing mindfulness. And this was quite a revelation to me. But then when I thought about it, actually, that it only confirms what I had already known. I was talking to one of our fellow employees here, and we were talking about Kundalini. And he was saying how, Kundalini is very dangerous. And I said, well, it can be. The practice of mindfulness can be very dangerous. And he said, I've never heard that the practice of mindfulness can be dangerous. And so this led me to think about these articles that were printed, and some of you may have read the articles in various journals, and it is worthwhile reading them. And there is truth to them. It does not mean that the practice of mindfulness should be discarded or in any way dismissed, but it is putting it in a context that sometimes the practice of mindfulness alone is certainly not sufficient, and sometimes the practice of mindfulness for some people with some conditions can actually exacerbate that condition or make it worse, not better. And in the West, now we have the practice of mindfulness being taught widely, as I've said, but also taken out of its spiritual context quite often. It's being taught as a cognitive practice to help develop a better quality of life. So it's taken out of its spiritual context. And there are many teachers teaching mindfulness practices, slight variations amongst them, but in general they just stress this approach to bringing greater awareness or clarity into your life, making an effort to actually notice what you are doing, what you are experiencing, how you are feeling in the present moment as you go through life. And we as human beings actually have this capacity, all of us have this capacity. It is not equally developed amongst all people. Some people have very little self-awareness, if you want to call this mindfulness self-awareness. In other words, the ability to reflect on what one is experiencing in the present. Some people are not thus inclined. They act pretty mechanically and habitually most of the time. You'd be surprised how many of us fall into that category. Other people have a greatly developed self-awareness, reflective quality of mind, where they are very much attuned to their experience, attuned to their present existence and how they are interacting with the world in the present moment. But we all have some of it. We all have some of this self-awareness. And it can be strengthened if we make a little effort. If we intentionally choose to notice more, we can notice more. So these practices of mindfulness that are being taught are skillful means to try and encourage people to become more fully present as they go about life. And so mindfully present is a good way of maybe defining mindfulness, that the mind is more fully engaged in life as we experience it, and not only externally but internally. So there is this reflective clarity, knowing what is happening within us. So this quality of mind fully present is something that can help us break many bad habits, because we start noticing. If we start noticing how we relate to someone, our attitude towards work, and then how we relate to work. We have to go to work, and then how we think about work, and how we go through the day at work, and what we're creating around that. We start noticing patterns in our thinking, in our attitude, in our motivation, what we bring forth as we relate with people, as we relate with a situation, as we relate with work, as we relate with life. We start just noticing. And as we notice, the mindfulness notices. The idea is that you're going to learn something. And what you should be learning is that you notice some of these habits are not very good. Some of these attitudes are not very good. Some of these ways in which we perceive ourselves, perceive others, and react to situations are not very good. They're creating problems for us. They're creating misery for us and others quite often. In the noticing of that, of course, there should arise understanding, and then change, growth, the willingness to change, the willingness to relinquish some of these bad attitudes, bad ways of coping, bad habits. And bad here doesn't mean that somebody out there is judging you. It's just that you, as you become more self-aware, notice when I meet this person and I get this feeling, and then I do this and relate in this way, this is the outcome of it, and it's it's not really what I want. It's not nice. It's not the world I want to live in. It's not the relationship I want to have. I don't want to feel like that. I don't want to create this situation. So understanding. So that leads then to motivation to change. And with more mindfulness and more observation, you start exploring alternatives as to how you will deal with this situation, this person, and start responding or bringing something different out of yourself that brings about a more positive, healthy experience both for you and the others. Now that's the power of mindfulness. It's wonderful. As Thich Nhat Hanh, in one of his little books, has said, the miracle of mindfulness. It is miraculous when it works properly, which requires the right instructions, the right understanding, the person who's in the right frame and state to be able to use that instruction, implement it, and then learn from it, and bring about that growth and change. So this is the practice of mindfulness that we would like to encourage and would like to have, all of us. However, there are pitfalls. Often, a benign pitfall, one could say, is that mindfulness is it doesn't achieve very much. You notice, and you notice. It's like people who experience a lot. Very experienced person, not necessarily wiser, just been around a long time. So noticing and just keep repeating the same things is, it's all right. It's benign. It doesn't achieve anything very much. And a great deal of mindfulness practices that are taught and that are taken up by people, I think, do fall into this category. We do become we notice it, but we don't follow through. We don't see much transformation. Mindfulness by itself does not have the power to transform. It requires something more. So this is kind of a benign effect of it, that it's fine, nothing much happens. But there can be also adverse. And I have seen this. Some people, as they turn this light of self-awareness and start noticing them, you notice yourself. You notice yourself more. And some people who have propensity, say, for negative states of mind, sometimes just noticing it more just makes it worse. You just get, if you tend to be depressive, and then you kind of notice that you're depressed, you just feel worse. Sometimes noticing it, because just noticing it isn't going to change anything. And what you're going to do with that noticing depends on many other factors. One is the context. If you still identify very strongly with this depression, this mood, you identify with it, yeah, I'm really down. Boy, I'm so gloomy. I'm just a hopeless, that's true. Mindfulness, there it is. It's telling me I'm just a hopeless case. It's true, I'm just depressed. So it's an affirmation of something, and then it's like you just feel worse. Sometimes it actually makes it a lot worse. People who are prone to, say, insecurity and the anxiety of insecurity, they start noticing how impermanent everything is, how things are changing both around them and within them, and their feelings are changing quite a lot. Yes, I want to do that. Well, and then no, maybe not. And they start. The more you notice that, then it's a spiral. You really start feeling very, very insecure, unsure, and unable to act. So it exacerbates that condition. And I have seen this in many, many people. Not the majority, by no means, but there are cases, is the point. So the literature that is coming out, or has come out recently, where it cites individual cases of people practicing mindfulness and experiencing some of these adverse results, are valid for those individuals. It does not mean that the practice of mindfulness is not good, but for those individuals, it's lacking. And maybe it could be the way that they practice it, but more likely it's the person, the condition that they're in. Maybe this is not the best thing for this person at this time. Or there is not sufficient context to that practice, not sufficient not sufficient understanding and learning with regards how to view and deal with what they're seeing. What they're seeing is something that's not seen in a context. This identification is very strong, and then the reaction is not a constructive reaction. So this is the problem that we want to avoid, and in the practice of mindfulness. Now, this problem that I've been talking about is with people in lay life, say in societies such as America now, practicing mindfulness out of the context of, say, the traditional spiritual path. And sometimes people say, well, the reason why these people are having problems is because they're not receiving good guidance, good teachings, and saying these lay teachers are not really qualified to teach, and that's why these people are having problems. I would question that greatly, because I think many of the teachings that are offered in the present day, out of the context of any religious tradition or any tradition, are actually of high quality. But there are some problems sometimes for some people. This is equally, if not more so, in some of the traditional practices of mindfulness within the traditional context of, say, Buddhist monasticism. I was a Buddhist monk for 23 years. I went into it with great expectations and very inspired, very, very inspired and enthusiastic and motivated, to the extent that I was not bothered by some of the things that I saw happening around me that were actually quite worrisome in retrospect. And that's what I said, is when I read these articles in these journals today, in these recent times, I reflected back on when I became a monk and what I saw happening in some of the monasteries that I lived. And there, mindfulness is being taught within the context of the Buddhist teachings. The path of Buddhist practice is to cultivate the Eightfold Path in order to purify the mind, in order to help one attain enlightenment. Sounds good. To cultivate the Eightfold Path, some of the factors in this path, or one of the factors, is mindfulness. So one is encouraged to practice mindfulness, one is encouraged to practice all forms of meditation in order to cultivate the mind so as to free the mind, so as to experience insight and attain enlightenment. Sounds wonderful. And I was inspired. The meditation monastery that I became a monk at where I became a monk was in Bangkok. And it was just by accident that I found this monastery, but they taught meditation. The abbot was a well-known meditation teacher, quite highly respected, and he taught a particular form of meditation. And just to leap ahead a little, I didn't stay at that monastery very long because I didn't particularly like the environment, and two, I didn't relate to the teacher that much. And I wanted something a little more inspiring than what I saw around there. But one of the things I remembered after reading these articles was, while I was just a novice at that monastery. This monastery is in the suburbs of Bangkok, and even then, this was in 1972. Bangkok was very different than what it is now. This was in an outer suburb. There were houses and streets around, but this was a nice little monastery. And it had a section devoted for monks who would go on retreat, meditation retreat, so that food would be brought to them. They would stay in their, what they call their huts, or it's a little building for each monk. And they had a quiet environment. They would see the teacher once a day, or maybe every few days. And, so I'm living at this monastery. And one day there's this big crowd, and all the police are there, and what's going on? One of the monks had just hanged himself. He was on this meditation retreat, and he just overnight, he'd hanged himself with his rope. And in retrospect, I'm thinking, boy, if that would happen now, I would leave. That's pretty bizarre, isn't it? You're going to stay at this monastery to learn about meditation, and somebody just hanged themselves. I didn't think anything about it. So all of the things happen. You're inspired, you want to practice, you want to meditate. And so at that monastery, there was a couple of other Westerners around the same time. I left before the Rains retreat, which is it's a 3 months retreat that monks and novices stay in a particular place. So I left that monastery before then. But one of my friends who stayed there was a husband and wife, Americans. I shouldn't say their names, nope. But they were from Boulder, Colorado. And they ordained. And she became a nun, he became a monk, and then they went to she went to a branch monastery. And during that retreat, she had a breakdown. I'm practicing meditation, have a bizarre, and it's strange. Never thought anything about it. Things happen. In many of the monasteries that I lived, there were cases of extreme things happening. And then as I became more senior and eventually had a teaching role and running the monasteries, I did see that for some people certainly, it was a really bad choice to go into that lifestyle of such intensity and such focus on introspection. Anyone with the slightest propensity for schizophrenia, propensity for bipolar, propensity for post-traumatic stress problems, or just instability, when they are put in these extreme, and the monastic life is quite extreme if we compare it to normal life. And then the monasteries where they stress meditation, again, it's quite intense. The schedule is intense, the time that you spend alone is intense, the amount of effort to bringing the attention in, developing greater supposedly, you think of meditation, you always think of clarity, relaxation, bliss. But that intensity for some people has very negative results. So even within the traditional context, where mindfulness is taught as part of a path with such high ideals, for some people it's just not very helpful and can be very counterproductive, sometimes disastrously. And this is also found in the Buddhist scriptures. If one reads some of the scriptures of the Buddhist canon, one will find cases where even the instructions of the Buddha being given to monks, and then they practice them maybe with the wrong understanding, and the wrong results come about, and monks go off, go a bit crazy. So what is the problem here? The problem is not that the practice of mindfulness is not good, or that it is not beneficial. The practice of mindfulness is great. We do want to bring a greater sense of presence into our lives. We don't want to live mechanical, habitual, reactive, kind of half awake lives, because we want to be able to not only fully experience life, but fully learn from our experiences and really utilize this time as a human being in this life to grow and mature at every level into a better being, human being, and move closer to the perfect enlightenment. So yes, mindfulness is great. We should practice it, but within the context. So for us, people today here, those of you who have a regular practice, good, keep practicing it. I would ask this of you though. When you practice, whatever it is that you're practicing, what do you experience? What's it feel like to you? Do you actually see things? Do you see more things about yourself, about what you're experiencing? Are you learning anything from what you see? Are you able to bring about the transformations that you are aspiring for? When you practice formal meditation, what does it feel like? When you sit and do your formal meditation, and many here will have a formal practice that you do and maybe use slightly different techniques, but when you're doing it, what do you feel like? Is there clarity? I like to use this word clarity. In other words, is there a reflective quality where you know what's happening now, where your attention is, when it goes wherever, if it's on what your meditation object is, you know that. It goes somewhere, you know that. Is there an ability to rein in the attention and bring it to bear on the meditation object with ease, or is that still a struggle? When you are meditating, does it feel pleasant? Does it feel peaceful? Do you feel relaxed and contented? Or does it feel like a strain? Is there an edge to it? Is it stressful for you? Because, it's kind of ridiculous, but it's true. Many times people meditate and feel stressed. And we have these ideals. Sometimes we just have an ideal about meditation that prevents us from acknowledging reality. It's like living in denial. It's just like, I meditate. But it is an inability to say, my meditation sucks. And they say, I meditate, and it's a struggle. Actually, if I do it for too long, I start feeling quite intense. Now that's important to notice that, because only then can you adjust what you're doing. And maybe adjusting what you're doing is knowing how far you can practice at this time, and then how you make effort. Is the meditation, the goal of the meditation is peacefulness, tranquility, serenity. It's not that, sometimes people say that if you do, actually I've heard people speak quite disparagingly about tranquility, as if it's, oh no, you don't want to get stuck in tranquility, because then, by golly, you'll just get stuck there, and it may feel good, but it's just not, you're not going to get any insight. You're not going to get any wisdom. You've got to suffer to have insight. Well, it's not true, actually. The Buddha said that from tranquility, from serenity, comes concentration, which leads to insight. From the state of stress, we can learn, this is stress. We can change. You change. You learn that it's not where you're supposed to be. It's not where you're supposed to be. This is, it needs something to change it. So in our practice of formal meditation, I greatly encourage this beginner's mind, which is a well-known phrase, but take it to heart. It really does mean you're just starting each time, and see what's happening. How you're making this effort, and is it peaceful? It's a good question to ask yourself. Is there clarity? Is it peaceful? Is there clarity in your relax? If there's not peacefulness, if you're finding you're practicing meditation and your face is screwed up and you're, relax. That's the effort now, is to relax. Relax into your meditation. If you're doing mindfulness of breathing, just relax into that breathing. Get out of the way and let the body breathe, and just relax. Enjoy the breath. Rather than, I've got to focus on the breath. That's different. If your mind is just, maybe wandering, and you notice that your mind is just, it's just wandering and wandering and wandering. Well, try to tighten the rein in a little and try to focus a little more. But sometimes your mind is just not cooperative. maybe this is not gonna, you can't make it peaceful. You cannot make your mind peaceful, but you can notice that it's not peaceful. And sometimes that's as much as you're gonna get. Now, with awareness in daily life, how do we bring greater mindfulness in our daily lives? Because as I said, we don't want to just live habitual, mechanical, reactive, but a good portion of our lives is habitual, mechanical, and reactive. And that's the first thing to notice. Let's just actually notice that. How do you notice more? How do you become more mindful? Again, it's the actual Pali word for mindfulness, sati. Pali it's like a lesser language than Sanskrit, to the extent that it was more a vernacular rather than the classical language. So sati, in the Buddhist context, actually is a closer definition of it, or a closer rendering rather, is remembering. But we say mindfulness, remembering. But it's not remembering something, it's remembering to be in the present. Remembering to bring this quality of knowing more fully in the present moment. And this knowing, remember, mindfulness, this knowing by itself, its power is not that great. But if it's associated with some understanding and other factors, it can be powerful. So, but bring this knowing, remembering now, what am I doing? What am I feeling? Not as an analysis, discursive preoccupation, not as self-conscious observation, rather just relaxing into the present moment and noticing a little more. And of course, the first thing you will notice is how easily you lose it. You lose that quality. But slowly, you can build this quality. It's like more space, more silence in the mind. And that is a requirement in order to be able to bring more mindfulness, or to have more mindfulness in daily life, is to be able to turn to that spacious silence, to actually have more space and silence in the mind. Now, I have heard many people talk about multitasking, and then this is, some people praise it, some people debunk it. I remember we had a speaker here, a very good friend of mine, who talked about single tasking rather than multitasking. And these are both okay. I don't care whether you multitask or single task, as long as you know what you're doing. It's not, life, it's impossible for us to go through life single tasking, really. It's and to the extent that to be normal and live a normal life, sometimes you do drive and talk. Sometimes you do eat and listen. And sometimes you think and sweep the floor or do the dishes. I mean, who's going to just single task everything? I think it's good practice, you see. It's very good practice to do under certain conditions. We should cultivate the ability to single task. In other words, to be able to focus our attention on a task, an activity, and give it our full engagement, our full attention. That is a very powerful skill to develop, and it's very important, okay? But life does require that we go through life often doing a variety of things and giving attention, spreading our attention a bit here, a bit there. And that's all right for many activities in life. You can get by. But the problem is that that becomes so habitual that we're unable then to ever really have clarity, ever really have precision, ever really care for something fully. To be fully mindful of something is caring. This thing is, you care, you value. You value this, you're giving it your full attention. So we need that capacity. So in our daily life, I think it's fine. We do a variety of things. I like to think of practicing mindfulness in daily life as bringing just a little more presence, not being completely lost and half-hearted and distracted as you go about what it is you're doing. And I always encourage trying to at least notice where physically we are, what we're doing physically, as a reminder of the present moment. Because the physical is always in the present. Your body is always in the present. It's often missing from your mind. Your body is often missing. You lose it. It is unusual. Nobody goes to the police station and reports a missing body, or I lost my body. But in actual fact, for a good portion of the time, we're very unaware of our physical being in the context of where we exist. And we're preoccupied with our mental creations, often of very little value, and as I have said in the past, it's just clutter. And we have this propensity and addiction to accumulating clutter. The clutter we accumulate in the closets and in the basements and in the attics is bad enough. Now, we don't need to have it also stuffed in our heads with just this ruminating about everything that's gone. Anticipating everything that's going to come. And thinking, get back and forth, the past, the future. And then all those thoughts about shoulds and shouldn't, or coulds and couldn'ts, maybe and not. And I wonder, and it goes on and on. Clutter, noise, pollution of the mind. Not that when I say pollutions, I don't mean that it's negative or bad. I just mean that it's clutter to that extent. So what about making just a little effort to be more present, kind of aware of one's physical activity as you go through the day, trying to be a little more engaged in what you're doing and how you're presenting yourself to the situation, how you're receiving the situation, just noticing a little more whether you're getting irritated by this person or that person, whether you're feeling energetic or dull. Just notice. And then noticing how you're what you're bringing out, what you're bringing back out there in terms of how you're dealing with things and people and life in general. So this requires that we have a little silence in the mind, a little space that allows the reflective quality of the mind, which is mindfulness, to happen. And we start noticing ourselves. Now, regardless of what you see, whatever you see, whatever, and here I don't mean by the eye of the mind, whatever you notice, whatever you observe with the mind, know one thing. It is not you. It is not yours. Furthermore, the second thing, it is not permanent. It's going to change. And thirdly, we could say that it's unsatisfactory. It's in the sense it's not worth making it, it's just, isn't this something beneficial to you? Okay, if it's not, let it go. So, what we notice about ourselves is not, it's just like you're noticing somebody else. It's not you. Don't take it personally. You have negative tendencies. Don't take it personally. You see failings. Don't take it personally. But learn from it. It's a teacher. It's not you, it's your teacher. That's what my teacher used to tell me. It's your teacher. Whatever mood you notice, whatever state of mind or whatever tendency or whatever, it's your teacher. Be a good student. Learn from this. Don't identify it and take it personally and feel bad or feel elated. Neither reaction is worth anything. This is it's teach. Is this? What am I seeing here? Is this? What's it going to teach me? Maybe it'll teach me how to avoid creating this in the future. Maybe it'll teach me how I can view. If I come to work every day and I say, what a rotten place, what a horrible place to work. I can't stand it, These people, look at them, they're lazy. They don't work. They're just standing around talking all the time. And you do that, and you develop, you develop this very, you feel bad, you feel critical, and it's not nice to feel critical, but you also can't enjoy anything of what's around. Rather, and that can creep into anything, whether it's a job, whether it's where we live, whether it's the country we're in. Americans, this is we've got it all. But people still, everybody complains about how bad it is here. Everybody complains about how rotten and bad, and we just had an election. And the biggest, this is not political, but I'm sure that the biggest motivator for the voters was dissatisfaction. That was the biggest motivator, dissatisfaction. That's sad. It really is sad. Because, boy, we've got so much. There are so many good things. It's just so, it's not perfect, no, but that the biggest mental state that resonates with the American people today is dissatisfaction. That's kind of sad. So it indicates, but it's easy to get into that. So people are employed. How many people who go to work being dissatisfied? And I'm not saying their job is perfect or that their conditions are perfect. I have no idea. But I'm, speaking about my own job, and I can get this, but then you think, well, it's actually pretty good, It's not bad. I'm not being tortured. I come to work, nobody whips me. That's pretty good, I'm not getting whipped every day. It could be worse. I'm just saying that with awareness, just noticing what we are generating with our thoughts and our attitudes in relation to our experiences in life, learn something. And what we want to learn is how to create a more peaceful, happy existence, both internal and external. In other words, bad habits of either action, bad habits of speech, bad habits of thought that are generating tension, stress, misery for ourselves and others are our teachers, so that we can learn from them and then take the next step where we actually, that's not what I am. I can be something different. I can create something different, something better. And that's the power of mindfulness helps us do that. But we need to have a good understanding, some effort, and some wisdom, and bring about this transformation that has been seen by and experienced by many people, much, much greater than the few cases where the practice of mindfulness in whatever form has resulted in some maybe not such good results. If you'd like to know more about, this is a general talk, so it's not specific instructions of practicing mindfulness. I certainly encourage you to read any of the wonderful books that are out there, any of the books by Thich Nhat Hanh on mindfulness, he's excellent. My own book is a good primer. I would certainly recommend it to anyone, especially if you'd like to practice meditation, formal meditation as well. And there are, I'm not going to, there are so many out there these days, and if you are a poor student who can't afford to buy a book, you don't need to buy them. You just go online, you can read. There's just so much material. Mindfulness is a wonderful thing, but its power is limited. It needs context. And having more information is helpful. Having the guidance of a teacher is also very, very helpful. And sometimes, having community, in other words, associating with groups of people who are practicing a spiritual path can be very uplifting and supportive. So that's my allotted time for this reflection on the power of mindfulness. Those of you who heard me speak on previous occasions probably knew what to expect, or rather not, as I said, not a lecture, it's a contemplation around this topic, and sharing some insights from my own experience of it. But I would welcome to have questions with regards to any specific item that you would like clarification on. Thank you for your patience.
So John, I was wondering if there is, you've alluded to a number of things that it can be taught through the medical profession or through a spiritual teacher. But I'm wondering, I guess, if there is a formal definition for mindfulness. And if so, how does it differ from, say, a technique of healing like therapeutic touch or Reiki, or a meditational technique?
Well, I'm sure there is a definition of mindfulness. It is an English word, so Oxford must have had a definition for it. But
I guess I'm asking if you have.
if I have, yes, I think of mindfulness as a process of the mind becoming clearer, more present, and more reflective. Recollecting the present more fully in a reflective manner is what I think. And this can only be work. You can only work towards this by the practice of endeavoring to remember the present moment, the now, and then being able to relax into that present moment. And this is kind of critical, because some people who try to do this achieve that clarity and that presence, but not in a relaxed manner. And the difference between what that state and what I'm thinking of being mindful is the difference between alertness and mindfulness. Alertness is something that's it's instinctively hardwired into every living creature as a survival response. When there is danger, you're alert. There's no choice. If somebody right now, maybe just happened to have a cobra in their pocket, a snake, and it just immediately, appears in front of you, it's not, I'm going to have to try and be alert now because, I have to be alert. It's the instinctive reaction to danger is a kind of an arousal of energy and attentiveness to this moment of danger. Okay, so that's instinctual reactive kind of awareness or mindfulness, but that's alertness. And alertness is always associated with an edge, a stress. It's putting great stress on the nervous system, physiological nervous system. It's putting great stress on it because it's generating everything, everything is on edge. To react, to escape, or to fight, to do something with this cobra. So, alertness, if you, either by conditions being such that you're kind of forced to be alert for a long time, or you train yourself to be alert. And the result of that, you're going to get extremely stressed out. And this is what post-traumatic stress, the conditions of that. And I've seen that in some practitioners. They develop, they're practicing meditation with this great effort to be attentive, to be really present, continually present and attentive, usually awareness with concentration. The first monastery, I spent my first rains retreat as a monk. The monastery that I went to, from the one where a guy hanged himself, I went to this other one. Nobody hanged himself. But, it was very intense meditation. I mean, it's foolish. I shouldn't have gone there, but, I was very inspired. Not necessarily very wise. But I went and I did my 3 months there. And I remember, again, things bring these memories. So this monk, we used to do, you get up at 4 and all day you did walking, sitting, standing, meditation. That's all you did. then there was a meal break, but that's all. You do sitting, standing, walking, meditation all the time, all day, until the night. And it's really intense. Really, really intense, and then we'd do this walking. It was a big monastery, and it had a big open area at the center of it. And the walking meditation in this monastery could be done by yourself, but for 1 hour of each day, we all had to walk together, and we walked in this big, long line around this courtyard. It was a big area, and you walk very slowly, barefoot. It was sandy. You walk very slowly, concentrating on every movement of your foot. It's very intense, so you become really aware of the guy walking in front of you. So this monk, and I didn't know any of these people. I mean, I didn't speak the language. I just walked in my own world. But this guy, he was walking so slowly, and I knew that if I was behind him, I'd have to walk so slowly. And every time I'd end up behind him, and he walked so, but it didn't matter. There was nowhere to go. I mean, you just walk around. But he was such intensity. And I thought, God, he must have really good meditation. This guy must be really nearly there. He's so good. And he would always walk so slowly, and then he'd walk, even after the walk, after the hour, the bell would go, and then he'd walk so slowly to we each lived in individual cabins, huts, whatever you want to call them. He walked so slowly up to his room, and then he would sit down. And they did this particular monastery, did this meditation where a lot of the time you're putting your attention on your hand, and you're raising your hand slowly up and slowly down. And you do this until you can... There was a technique that it's supposed to resonate with the beat of your heart, and then you turn your attention to the heart. Anyway, but he was so dedicated. He was just so intense in his effort. And I was so impressed with this guy. So we don't do much talking, and I couldn't talk anyway, because I could talk, but nobody understood what I said. After the 3 months retreat, I heard from another monk. There was a few Westerners there, and this other monk who could speak some Thai, and he told me that this monk had come to see him to ask for some medicine. He wanted some medicine to help him, to help him relax. So he could sleep and rest. In other words, he was extremely alert, but what he was experiencing was not peaceful. There was no tranquility. There was alertness, sharpness of attention. I'm sure he could sustain that attention, but that is not very helpful in the long. It's not a peaceful state. There is great energy. There is great clarity in the sense of sharpness, but what are you going to do with it? It's miserable. It's not pleasant, and eventually you burn out. You can't sleep. You can't rest. You can't. He wasn't in a very good state, and probably that would be detrimental in the long. Even if he stops meditating, you go away. That's some trauma you've caused to the nervous system. So this is very important with, what I think about mindfulness is that it is a practice which is clear. There's clarity, there is knowing, but there's a sense of ease of relaxing into it, being present in a relaxed way. There has to be that no edge. It's not because of fear or because of force. It's because of actual enjoyment. Mind fully present in the moment in this way is restful. I mean, it's unburdened. Unburdened of the past, unburdened of the future. The mind is enjoying. And everything is more vibrant and everything is more wonderful. It's a very healthy, I guess that's the point of it. It's a very healthy experience. So that is a characteristic that I would venture to say happens sometimes with people who are too strenuous in their effort. And if you notice that, I mean, if your practice of mindfulness is not peaceful, then, notice that. And so adjust, it's not meant to be like that. And don't try to, if you try to think of how you can be more mindful, notice that you've already lost it. It's like, there is no way to really think about it. You can't think being mindful, you can be mindful. You can't think that I'm, awareness. And like, I used to give the example, I used to teach a lot more than I do now. I don't do much teaching, but I used to give an example of, say, I want to get up from this chair. If I try to think of all what I have to do in order to be able to get up from this chair, I would never be able to sort it out. I mean, how can you possibly think of all the movements, all the muscles that have to be activated and relaxed? There are millions of them. You can't think it out, but you can get up. I mean, I'm thankful that I can get up sometimes. You can do it. And the same with mindfulness practice. It's difficult to try and say, well, this is how you become mindful. And now be mindful. And if you start thinking about it, just think, relax, notice what you notice. Learn from what you notice. And also, as you've learned something, maybe change what needs to be changed.